Hey there, and welcome back to another Miraculous Ladybug video. And today we're going to be talking about Thomas Astruc, and more specifically, an interview from Thomas that has a lot of spicy details that have worked a lot of the fanbase up into a frenzy. And I mean, we're talking about Thomas. This dude's drama and clashes with the fanbase have fueled many of my videos over the years. Never change, Big T! Never change. And of course, the fanbase was going to go nuts, no matter what he actually said, because I honestly don't think there's many creators of such a popular show that are so widely disliked by a vocal portion of the fanbase, whilst the show keeps getting more and more successful. Sometimes you'll see creators fall from grace when a show declines in quality and success, but I'm pretty sure this franchise is more lucrative than ever before. And Season 5 was apparently the most successful season ever. Hell, they clearly have more money, hence the graphical upgrade. But yeah, Astruc did an interview on Twitch with one of the producers, I think, where he talked about a bunch of different topics to do with the show. And thankfully, some absolute Chad made a Reddit summary, which is very easy to read through, and I'll link that in the comments so you can take a look at it. So I figured I'd work my way through that summary and see what the big fella had to say and give my thoughts on everything, because there's a lot of discussion of the past and the future of the show. A lot of interesting tidbits. And honestly, there are some cringe comments too, and just so we're clear, this is all based on translations. So if I've missed anything or misrepresented anything, my bad. But they seem to line up with his previous thoughts and comments on the topics that we've seen before, and so yeah, time to jump into it, okay. So the first thing to note from the post is that the character of Lila is the most difficult for him and the writers to write. And that's the main reason as to why she disappears after her debut in Season 1 and doesn't come back until the end of Season 2. And yeah, it is actually a big, noticeable gap between her appearances, and honestly, I think based on some of the show's writing quality, people might be tempted to scoff at a statement like this and say, oh, yeah, sure, you probably just forgot about her. But I actually think this is a rather fair statement to make, because on the surface of it, she seems like an out-and-out, completely unsympathetic, cruel villain. There's not one single redeeming quality about her, no positive traits. She's an out-and-out monster at times, and on the surface of that, she's clearly meant to have some sort of personality disorder, I'm pretty sure. Characters like Chloe and Gabe, they're given reasons to show why they are the way they are. And even though they're villains, they're often presented, as a bumbling fool at times. Gabe is a total smooth brain until like Season 4, when he miraculously gets some good ideas, but then the plot screws him over relentlessly. But he's still a joke. And I mean, Chloe was always treated as a joke by the narrative, but Lila is different. She's awful and toxic, and a more mature villain overall. Feels like she's almost too real for the early story, because all the other characters at that time are very much over-the-top caricatures. But Lila feels like the worst sort of person that you could actually meet in real life. There's a depth to her that I think would be hard to write in those early days when they're still finding their footing. And you can see that, like when she loses her shit and things don't go her way. That rage. It's like a real hatred. And I think it's hard to include characters like that, especially when you go the extra mile and then give them super convoluted personal lives. I mean, how many mums does she have at this point? It's just not the type of character you really expect from this genre, so I could see how they might struggle to include her more, especially in those early days when the show was at its goofiest. It was a tone clash, and the story and characters needed to mature a bit more to include her and have it feel like it makes sense. Another tidbit is that we have already seen why Lila's like this apparently, or something along those lines. I tried to understand. But it's apparently in a more abstract, looking back in the future, you'll be able to understand why she is the way she is. And I'm a bit confused here. I thought it was quite clear she's just meant to be one of those people that genuinely suck. They do exist. And she seems like one of them, although I'm down for backstory. Somebody in the comments mentioned time-traveling Manon, which gave me a good giggle. Oh, that is one of the most hated characters in the show, I swear. All just for being an annoying little girl. I doubt it would happen, but if it did, imagine those mad lads would become legends in my eyes forever, simply for taking the most ridiculous and chaotic path possible. Honestly, I think her backstory is just that she craves approval and adoration, and it's going to be due to neglect. It feels like a pretty obvious choice based on her characterization so far. And so I think that's what's going to tie it all together when all is said and done, but like I said, we'll have to wait and see. Next up, and here's the part that's likely going to build the salt, there was a discussion of Chloe, which is always where the most rational, reasonable, and not at all bitter takes is going to be found. There was discussion of how Chloe had been given all the tools by the writers to succeed as a character and earn her redemption, acting like she's a real person. And that even Thomas wanted her redemption, but they felt like it didn't make sense for her character to become a good person, because a real person in her shoes wouldn't. And I gotta say, this is a baffling and altogether head-scratching take. What? She's not a real person, she's fictional. And I think based on her arc, it does make a lot of sense. Defying her abusive mother? Becoming better? Which in turn inspires her dad to be better and break free of Audrey? I'm down with that storyline, it sounds great. Like, if we're going just straight along on realism, there's a lot of different character choices that probably shouldn't happen but still do. Like everybody always siding with Lila over Marinette, but they do it for the sake of the plot, for a good story, to make the audience feel pissed off. I just don't get it. I don't understand how you can write a show like this and then say, oh no. In my show about superhero teenagers who regularly outwit a grown man who has endless time to plot and a huge fortune to use on winning, that having a rich, spoiled princess archetype have some sort of redemption, no. That's going to stretch my believability too far. It feels like cope. To me, it's clear that at some point they decided they didn't like this character because they do plant the seeds. They have her really admire Ladybug, want to emulate her, not just for clout, but because she really thinks Ladybug's awesome, because she wants to be that way too. And I don't think you need to even write her to be a perfect person. You can keep her as a selfish, bratty bully, but one that does the right thing at the right time despite her bad personality. Those types of characters exist all the time in superhero fiction, so why can't she? But nope, she sucks apparently, and that's that. Honestly, it's at the point that I do wonder, did he base her on anybody from his personal life? School bully maybe? His first girlfriend that dumped him horribly? Like, what's going on here? And what's even more egregious to me is that they give Andre a redemption. Like, he is her main carer. It is his fault that this has happened and she's like this because he never set boundaries or was firm with her at all. But we're supposed to care about him? Apparently he and Gabe have some more backstory to be revealed, but I gotta say, at this point, who even cares? The less we see of Andre, the better, because his character is annoying, and Gabe's dead. Time to cut the losses and chart a new course, in my opinion. And that means getting away from the bungled storylines and starting fresh. Also, apparently Chloe's gonna be in season 6. Oh, my eyes rolled so far back into my head I've gone blind. Seriously, they need to let this storyline go. Let it rest. Let the character rest. Especially since they seem to have no interest in her being anything other than a villain. Like, why would you want her back again? It's just a rehash at this point. Another rehash. Do something fresh. Next up, there was discussion about the Miraculous anime reel thingy. Pretty much just explaining why it never got off the ground. And the style was viewed as too niche, not as palatable to the target audiences as the animation style they ended up going with, which, well, I'm hardly going to try to dispute that because it's probably true. I mean, that being said, when I was a kid, I watched heaps of anime and every other boy I knew did too. Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Beyblades, Bakugan. A lot of girls did too. So I do think there would have been an audience for it, but at the same time I can see the reluctance because in that era that I grew up in, 2D was the norm for kids animation. And so the anime style, whilst looking different to traditional Western cartoons, wouldn't feel out there, but the 2010s did bring a new audience expectation, and now that traditional style is more the outlier and done for effect. So I think they probably don't reach the same heights in the same target audiences that they want if they go with an anime style and presentation. And in the end, you can hardly argue that they made the wrong choice because it's been massively successful. In a perfect world though, I would like to see at least just one episode in that style. Maybe they fall into a parallel world or something. That would be a lot of fun. They're branching out in a lot of different directions, so I think I would be disappointed if they never touched on that again. Especially due to the popularity of anime now. It's growing far beyond the old niche status, and stuff like My Hero Academia and the viewing figures for that, I think it can attest to that. Then we have a few smaller tidbits. The writer's favourite episode is Simple Man, but yeah, I also enjoy Simple Man. It's rather funny. And the Gramps is inspired by Thomas's granddad. I mean, is every character based on somebody in his life? Also, the akumatization victims apparently design their own costumes, so is this a subconscious thing, like with the hero suits? Or do they actually have to spend time thinking, how can I look cool? And this knowledge actually goes and makes some of the characters pretty based in my opinion, and some to be majorly cringe because there are some terrible costumes out there. Poor Gabe. He's a fashion designer, and he doesn't even get to flex his creative muscles designing fancy suits for his villains. Although in hindsight, maybe that's a blessing in disguise because when he got his first crack at a Monarch suit, he made himself look like the fashionista cousin of Grimace from McDonald's. Next up, we had a no comment in regards to whether Marinette would ever be akumatized. And honestly, if we're going to extend this story out for 12 seasons, so an additional 7 on top of the 5 we've already had, so what? That's years and years and years of content, plus specials, plus films, plus whatever, maybe even spin-offs one day, then we're going to need some big plot points. And they've danced around this before, but now I think it's time. Maybe not this season, maybe not next season, but if any character's going to be able to get inside Marinette's head and get her akumatized, then it's going to be Lila. Nobody pushes her buttons quite like her, not even Chloe. It very much feels like it's a break glass in case of emergency type of plot point. and one that would need to be built up to over the course of a longer term story, and then followed up with another storyline where she deals with the aftermath, her self-doubts, her fears and whatnot. They've put it off for this long, so when they do pull the trigger, which I think they will, it has to mean something. So don't be shocked for this to happen in a season finale, or in the lead up to a finale where Lila gets taken down. I'm pretty sure they're only 100% going to season 8, with a hope to go beyond to maybe like season 12. So I wouldn't be shocked if Lila only lasts until the end of season 8, because they said they've written the ending of that season. Or they know the ending at least. And so you'd assume that would be the end of the Lila arc with hope to go beyond. And so the beginning of the end for a Lila arc would be a great place to put a Marinette akumatization. She gets her and figures out Marinette's identity, but Marinette breaks free of the Akuma, whatever you do. And then they clash at the end. But yeah, I do think it needs to happen because it's such a massive what-if scenario. And so you'd be insane to not want to explore it at some point. And speaking of massive what-ifs, we also got mention of the Supreme, whose story is apparently already written and who will appear at some point. Oh, thank God. The Alternate Universe Paris Special Adventure was so good. It's some of the most fun I've had in years watching the franchise, so I was pretty hopeful that we'd get more follow-up on that storyline. Hell, judging by the fact that it might cross into the main story, the Supreme might end up being quite a major villain. Maybe not as big as Lila, but could be a secondary villain type like Lila was for Gabe. That would be exciting. So I hope they continue on with that, and I hope it's good. And it would also be an interesting way to keep Gabe in the story because, there's good Gabe. There was also a reference to how the first meeting of Zoe and Marinette was meant to be a love-at-first-sight deal for Zoe, and that makes me feel sad. Hopefully they pull the trigger on some sort of romance for her. I know they have fears about censorship and whatnot for LGBT relationships, but I don't know, I just don't care about pandering towards crybaby bigots who can't handle a gay person existing. So I don't know, a character for her to romance would be nice, especially since she's a more major character than other canonical LGBT people. I know it wouldn't be with Marinette, but with somebody. I just hope she doesn't turn into a sad, pining, tragic love interest, making us all feel like shit. And speaking of tragic, unrequited love, Natalie's going to be getting more development this season, which is exciting. Is she Adrian's guardian now? Or did his aunt move in permanently? I guess the next season will explore that in more depth, but I think for sure Natalie's going to be a key figure in his life going forward. She already was, but I expect a lot more mothering. She started to become like that far more during season 5, especially towards the end, but, I want even more. I'm here for the wholesome. I'm rather excited to see what they have in store. And speaking of what they have in store, apparently they're still discussing a live-action adaptation, and I can only speak for myself when I say, nah, sounds cringe. Do not make this. I have zero interest in this. I do not ever want to watch it. I mean, if it comes out, I'll watch it for the laughs. But I can't see how this would ever translate well at all. Just keep it to animation. That's where your strength lies. Don't rehash the same story, just worse. Just don't, no. And then finally, we got to talk about Adrian. I don't really know what the context was when they were asked this question, but according to Big T, the executive above them doesn't view Adrian as a main character in the same vein as Marinette, and we're hesitant about him playing the lead in Lie. So, one episode out of over 100 or so where he would be the out-and-out lead, and they thought, nah, it's a bad idea. I don't even know what to say to that. If this is true, cringe. Like, what idiot thinks that variety is a bad thing? What fool would say this? It's just one episode. There's like 20 episodes a season. Marinette would still be the lead overall. One episode where it follows Adrian was not going to tank the ratings and get the show cancelled. I'm embarrassed for that executive if this is true. I mean, if they exist, because I have seen lots of speculation online that it's all bullshit and they're just covering their asses. I don't know if I can believe that either, because it sounds so absurd that you go out that way, but still, a lot of people think that. But it is hard to think that somebody could be so out of touch to think that in a season with 20 episodes, taking the focus off of Ladybug for even one of those episodes would be a bad idea. And I mean, hadn't she already taken a backseat in episodes before anyway? Not often, and she usually turns up, but there's been plenty of Gabe-focused episodes where the main narrative is the villain. And so I think this was just the most absurd takeaway we got from the interview. A true head-scratcher. And yeah, that was the last little tidbit I've got from the post and various other places I took a look at, and so guess I'll leave you here. So just a reminder, these have all been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of this Q&A and my thoughts on it? Are you with me? Maybe not. Do you have anything to add? I'm honestly curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.